classes. There are all sorts of wonderful ways in which you can connect with them. And I would encourage you to go to their website, Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and take advantage of the rich material that they are offering. The material that I've been teaching you comes from a weekly email that Rabbi Jonathan Slater is producing based upon commentaries in the Iturei HaTorah. So the notes that I'm going to share are the notes from him with my changes. So here we go. Okay, could everybody see it?
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let me make sure I can see all of you by expanding my screen. Okay, there you all are. Brenda, you're new to our Lunch and Learn. You haven't been with us yet, have you?
No.
This is your first time. How did you hear about it?
I was on the session that you did earlier today for Milton. I'm that Brenda.
Yes, no, I recognize you immediately. You were the one who brought tears to my eyes in that session. But how did you know about this Lunch and Learn?
So I looked you up and I found your shul. And actually, we know Hannah Esther, and she was our tour guide on one of our trips to Israel.
Oh.
So, that whole Jew thing.
Olam Katan.
That's so nice. Well, she teaches every Wednesday and every Thursday. So she has a class Thursday evening.
Correct, tonight.
A Talmud class. So if it's not too late for you, hopefully you will join. The class that Brenda's speaking about is I did a Melton class this morning at 9 o'clock for about 100 Melton students around the country. I think Gil Solomon was on it, if I remember. I may have seen him. But it's good that you're here, Brenda. Welcome to our community. It's nice to have you with us. And as I said, we're learning from texts that are prepared from Rabbi Jonathan Slater from the Institute for Jewish Spirituality.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yes, they are awesome. So, Parshat Emor. What does Parshat Emor deal with? Anybody know what the Torah portion is about? But it's good that you're here. Welcome to our community. It's nice to have you. Just a reminder, because I'm live streaming it, if you're watching the live stream in the back, you can turn it off and you can just participate in Zoom. That way we won't hear me in the background. It's hard enough to hear me once, but to hear me twice is an awful lot. So, all right. Torah portion and more. It is following the two double portions that we had last week, which were Achrei Mot Kedoshim. We're continuing to talk about aspects of holiness, specifically what it means to be a priest and how do priests have to function and what kind of state do they have to be in as priests in order to be able to function for the community. And in Parshat Emor, we also have an introduction to all of the cycle of the Jewish holidays. So I've chosen, let's see, how many texts did I choose today? 1, 2, 3. As is standard, we usually get through 1, maybe 2. Hopefully we'll get through the ones that I chose today because I think they're interesting. So the first one by Rabbi Abraham of Sakachu, attributed to his father, Rabbi Zev Nachman, Rabbi Biala, is, and do I have a volunteer, Leora? Can I be so bold as to ask you to read in the Hebrew and the English translation, and then we'll get somebody else to read the text.
I'm volunteering, Rabbi.
Thank you.
ספר ויקרא, ובא השמש וטהר, ואחר יאכל מן הקדושים, כי לחמו הוא. As soon as the sun set, he shall be clean, and for it he may eat and scatter donation.
The sacred donation.
Sacred donation, and they are his food.
Thank you. Okay. So we have this text that talks about when priests become tameh, when they become impure, they're not allowed to participate in and eat of the sacrifices because they have to be in a pure state. So the question is, how long does it take for them to be in a pure state? And what do they have to do to purify themselves? So there's a period of 24 hours that has to go by. They have to go to the mikvah. And once they go to the mikvah, then how do you determine when the new day begins so that they no longer are in that state of impurity? So the text says, as soon as the sun sets, he shall be clean. So the setting of the sun constitutes a new day for the priest, and therefore they are in a state of purity and can participate in the offerings. All right. It's a pretty simple verse that doesn't have a whole lot of need for explanation like some of the texts that we study do. So let's take a look at what the commentary says. Meva, can I call on you to read the commentary?
Okay.
I know I always get people surprised when they hear their name and then they have to go and figure out how do I unmute and where is it going and whatever it is.
Okay. The time for reciting the Shema in the evening is set with regard to that time when priests who had become impure might eat their sacred donations. From what time do we recite the Shema in the evening? From the time that the priest came in to eat of their truma.
Okay, so what we need to understand this is a little bit of a background. I was teaching in my class earlier today about the Siddur, that so much of the Siddur and also rabbinic texts are hyperlinked, meaning that they refer to all sorts of other things that they assume the reader of the text knows. So this rabbi is assuming that we know very well the first Mishnah in Masechet Brachot. And some of us may know that, and some of us may not know it. So let me share it with you just in case you do not know it. The very first Mishnah in Brachot begins, Me'ematai korina tashma. From what time do we recite the evening Shema? Now we know we're commanded to recite the Shema every morning and every evening. So the Mishnah is concerned with, is there a specific time that we are able to recite it in the morning? What constitutes morning? And is there a specific time in the evening that we can recite it? In other words, what constitutes evening? Is it when it's dark? Is it when the sun goes down? Is it when there's 3 stars that shine in the sky? Is it when my favorite television show of the evening turns on, or the 6 o'clock news? What is it that helps us determine what time is evening that we would then need to recite the Shema? Now, what's interesting about that Mishnah, and I've taught that Mishnah various times over the years to members of our community, so you may be familiar with it, you may not be familiar with it, but there's a number of opinions in that Mishnah. And the thing that you would assume you should see in the Mishnah for the answer is a time, right? We can recite the Shema at whatever it is, 10 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. But they don't do that because, as we know, evening changes over the calendar year. Sometimes it gets dark earlier, sometimes it gets dark later. So they need to come up with another way of framing it. And the way they frame it is they connect the recitation of the evening Shema to the time that the priests who were impure became pure and were able to eat from the sacrificial system. That in and of itself is interesting because by the time that the Mishnah was created, there is no priest, there is no temple, there is no sacrificial system. So why would they take something having to do with tefillah, prayer, the recitation of the Shema, and connect it to something that doesn't any longer exist? And when it did exist, it existed generations ago, and who even remembers those rules? But the rabbis want to connect prayer to sacrifice. They want to connect the recitation of the Shema to the korbanot, the offerings of the priests in the temple. So they arbitrarily make the timing of the evening Shema connected to when the priests were pure. And so that's where our commentary begins. Our commentary begins reminding us of that connection from the Mishnah. Everybody following me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. It's a little complicated and needs a little more explanation than most texts. But so now that we understand that connection, Mava, go ahead, continue reading.
What is a relationship? The relevance of the time of reciting the Shema and the time that is permitted to eat terumah. The priest had been impure, yet waiting all day and even bathing in a mikveh were not sufficient to purify them, so they may eat of terumah. Only the setting of the sun did that. The appearance of the stars signified that a new time period had begun, one that had no connection or relationship to the past. We can learn from that with the setting of the sun, it is incumbent on us to once again take on the yoke of divine sovereignty, since the force of the morning Shema lapses when a new time period begins.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. The second paragraph that Mava read, all right, he asked the question, why did the Mishnah connect the time of the priests eating to the determination of the time of the Shema? What does one thing have to do with another? And he presents us with an answer. And he says, the priests theoretically didn't need to wait for the setting of the sun in order to be purified. They had already gone to the mikvah, right? They waited all day long in order to get to the mikvah. They went to the mikvah. In normal circumstances, a mikvah is that which purifies that which is impure, right? If a woman who has finished her menstruation goes to the mikvah on a regular monthly basis and comes out of the mikvah, she does not have to wait until nightfall in order to be considered pure, in order to then have marital relationships with her husband. As soon as she's out of the mikvah, that's the consideration for her purity. So why is it with the priests eating the trumah, they had to wait to nightfall, dafka specifically, in order for them to be pure? So he says at the end of this paragraph, there's something significant about the setting of the sun. And what is the significance about the setting of the sun? He says a new time period has begun, one that has no connection or relationship to the past. That's the piece that struck me as something that I found to be very interesting. And that's where I want to ask you, what do you think he means by that? And have you noticed in your own life, in your own emotional or spiritual state of being, something that changes in you when night falls? Something that occurs to you, some experience that you have, or that we in general, we as a community, we as a society, we as human beings see and experience in nightfall. Brenda.
Well, I think, you think about in olden times when it got dark out at night, everybody came home and huddled in their homes with their families, which is a kind of more in-facing experience than what they were all day when they were out facing the world.
Okay, great. So one thing.
Bread, and she got salami and bread if you want to put a piece of cheese on it.
Somebody is not muted. I'm talking about lunch, which is great because I'm getting kind of hungry. So whoever was talking, if they can share it with
I
me.
apologize. That was at my house.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
We remember the emphasis on the family dinner in the evening and the power of family coming together and sitting down together and having a meal together and reflecting on our day together and transitioning from whatever was going on in our day to the unit of the family structure and the significance of that time together. Perhaps that's what Brenda's comment makes me think about. There's something about coming home where there's a certain sense of security, of a feeling of safety when we come back into the home that we don't have when we're out there in the cruel and open and dangerous world. And so maybe it's that feeling that the sages are, interested in us connecting to when we think about nightfall. How else do we think about nightfall? So on the one hand, there is the sense of coming home, safety and security. Are there other experiences? Are there other feelings? Are there other emotions that are related to nightfall that you have? Yeah, Leora.
I feel that nightfall, the way all our holidays, including Shabbat, starts at just before the stars are coming out. It feels a sense of an awe, of a renew, even though it's not the sun that's coming out, it's the moon that's coming with us and the stars. It feels like there is an awe. I know for us at home, Shabbat means calmness. When the kids were home and Mike used to come back from work, he said, now we can rest. So for me, evening is really a time of rest and renewal.
Very interesting. And that is, I think, the most counterintuitive piece of Judaism to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, as far as I know, because what do I know about the rest of the world? So let me say that many cultures, many religious faiths, and many people see mourning as a time of beginning, a time of starting, right? The sun comes up, a new day begins. We start with Moda ani lefanecha melechai v'kayam shehechazarta binishmati. You have returned my soul to me. Thank you for giving me the gift of this day. That is a very common experience. To that, Judaism is a bit counterculture. And they say, while it is true that a new day begins in many ways, that's not when the new day for Jews begins, as Leora pointed out. The new day for Jews begins in the evening. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but from an emotional standpoint, what does that mean? Why start a day in the night and not in the evening? Why shouldn't we start a day when the sun comes up? Why would Judaism begin Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker? And it was night and morning, the new day. Have you ever thought about that?
Mhm.
Right? Has it ever occurred to you that this is a crazy way of counting time? That we start in the evening and we don't start in the morning?
No.
What's the logic behind it? What is the emotional connection, perhaps, that our tradition is seeking in starting a day in the evening as opposed to starting a day in the morning? Okay, so Ziggy, Sandy, go ahead.
I think it's because it was easier to keep track with the moon and stuff. So you can put a starting point and an end point, as opposed to now that we have clocks, it's different. But in the old days, you had something to go by, and that was the easiest way to go by. I can't think of any other reason why.
Okay, so there wasn't anything emotional necessarily. It was simply a practical way that the moon and the cycle of the moon changes. So it's easier to tell time over long periods of time with the cycle of the moon than it is with the sun, which looks the exact same every single day. And once we have, once the solar calendar comes about with the recognition of the movement of the stars in aligning with the way the sun works, That's something, different, but fair enough. That could be a practical reason why evening began the day. Sandy.
Well, pardon me. You asked, does this seem weird? I don't remember. You probably used a far better word than weird. And my first thought is it doesn't, because like many things in our lives, it's what we've always done. It's how our holidays, as Laura mentioned, it's our, Shabbat. We start in the evening. It's what we do. But from I don't know if it's emotional or whatever, but we say we've had the chaos of the day. When it comes to Shabbat, we've had the chaos of the week, whatever that is, school, work, and everything else. And the sun sets, and you mentioned like we're sitting down at dinner, and that we slow down for a moment. If you've got a family and we're fortunate enough and we come together for dinner, to talk about how was your day. It gives us the the chance to change over. And when the sun is still up, when it's still light outside, we're still running around. I think that we stay in that that movement of the day, of the work day, of the school day, of the laundry day, whatever it may be. And so we give ourselves a minute to sit down in the evening, and it gives us, I think, that opportunity to transition. And we've always done it. So why stop now?
Okay, so that was my thinking as well. My thinking when I asked the question was that, we're human beings, but oftentimes we're human doings. We construct our life around what it is that we need to accomplish. We fill our days with tasks. We as human beings are unbelievably task oriented, and we judge ourselves and evaluate success around how much we achieve, how much we accomplish. Nothing wrong with that. 6 days a week we are created to work. 1 day a week we're commanded to rest. But I think psychologically, by beginning our day in the evening and not beginning our day in the morning, that is a cautionary statement to our purpose as human beings. That left to our own devices, we would work ourselves to the bone. That's what we talked about last week. Remember the first text that we looked at, the balance between how much time do we spend at our work and how much time do we spend in leisure and in study? And what is the goal of our work? The goal of our work is to provide for family and to give tzedakah, but also to provide for opportunity for leisure. So if we started our day in the morning, then our focus would primarily be on accomplishment, achievement. If we start our day in the evening, maybe our focus is on reflection, on meditation, on renewal, in order to have the energy to then begin the day in the proper mindset. Not just to have the energy, but to have the focus. The evening is the opportunity for us to step back and evaluate, so that when we wake up in the morning, we know exactly where we want to go, what we want to do, and how we're going to get there.
That's true.
Evening reframes for us as human beings how we need to be in the world. Human beings, not human doings. So if that's the case, right, and I think, by the way, evaluation, self-reflection, taking time to sit and set forth goals is not something that comes easy or naturally to any of us. We have a tendency to just jump in, to dive in, to take care of, to manage all of the things that we have to do. By starting the day in the evening, we are invited and encouraged to begin our day in reflection. And in reflection and in setting goals, be more productive or more efficient in our productivity in the following day. And so the priest, right, does just that. The Shema does just that. The Shema, connecting it to the priests and their sacrifice, says, it's time now to re-energize, to begin again, to reflect on where we need to go going forward. I was impure, but that impurity is something of my past. Now I am pure, and I have the opportunity with a set of newness, be able to move forward. So I want to jump to the first section of this is commentary by Rabbi Jonathan Slater. These sections emphasize two central concerns of Hasidic spirituality: the power and potential for renewal, and the need for awareness and devotion. Every breath is a gift from God, a new opportunity to wake up to the truth of our lives. Not only does God renew creation each day, but each moment. And we are invited to enter into that process directly to experience our own renewal from moment to moment. It is this process that makes possible tshuva, becoming a new person, able to move in new directions, to commit to true positive experiences. I venture to guess that most people who pray on a regular basis, you know what, I'm not going to say that. I ask the question, when you pray, if you pray on a regular basis, do you take time in the morning to pray, or do you take time in the evening to pray? Does morning prayer come to you more easily, or does evening prayer come to you more easily?
Evening.
Who said evening?
Right.
Why evening? June, were you the one who said evening?
Yes,
Why do you say evening?
because it gives you time to sit and reflect and regenerate.
So for you, you find it easier to pray in the evening than it is in the morning. What about others?
Yes,
Yeah, Neil.
yes.
I think the morning for me is easier because I feel refreshed and ready to go. It's very easy. At nighttime, oftentimes I'm much too tired to even think about anything. And the other thing, I have a question. Well, I got you. When you get up in the morning, does the priest have to is he tomei, or does he he's still pure when he wakes up in the morning?
Unless he had a nocturnal emission. And then if he had a nocturnal emission, then he's impure all over again. But assuming that doesn't happen on a regular basis, assuming he didn't have relations with his wife, then he remains in a pure state until something happens that causes impurity in the day.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Brenda, evening or morning?
So I want to say both, but for different kinds of prayers. So you talked about that in your other class. And for me personally, in the morning, I'm more in the petitioning mode, let it be a good day. I got to get this done. And in the evening, more of a gratitude mode.
Okay, so it's not that one is easier than the other. They have different focuses. Good. Other thoughts? Barry.
Well, I like the idea of evening because in the morning, I'm out of bed, I'm out of the house in 20 minutes and I'm on my day. But in the evening, I sit and reflect on what I have to do the next day, what I accomplished, etc. So I reflect in the evening.
If we were to take a poll of human beings, what do you think the majority would say? You think it'd be split down the middle? You think it would be morning, or you think it'd be evening?
I have no clue.
Miora?
I think morning. People will be more inclined to pray in the morning, also to get the blessing for the day to come, and focus on what they have to do, and hopefully with God's help, they can do it.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, like I think it was Neil who said it, in the evening, it's hard for me to make the time for evening prayer. I'm exhausted. long day, starts early in the morning, is filled with a zillion things. The last thing that I want to do is stop, reflect, rejuvenate. I just want to, do nothing. And again, that's me, as Neil said, and that's why I have an affinity towards this text, because this text is saying that that's when we need to refocus our energies and think differently. That's where prayer is so important. So there's a couple of questions that I want you to think about. And if there's an answer to any of these questions that you have, jump in. Have you had the experience of feeling like a new person, like someone other than you, who you had been previously in the evening? And what brought that about? Is it something that you feel you can bring about intentionally? Can it happen in a moment, or does it take time? So, right, are there moments where you can think the evening is what allows you to express a different side of you than was expressed during the day? Maxine.
I would say yes. And I think a lot of people do it without realizing it. By the end of the day, you said you were exhausted, but you've accomplished a lot. You're able to take a deep breath, and you have time to look forward to just sitting and just finding a new connection to yourself through prayer or whatever. And you've got the time to relax and to say, the evening prayer, whatever you're doing, and getting ready to be able to then eventually go to sleep and relax. You couldn't do that if you tried to take a nap, for me anyway, in the middle of the day. You've got too much going. And when you get up in the morning, it's like, go. By the time the evening comes, you have time to slow down a little bit, take a breath. And sometimes the prayers are very helpful too.
Thank you. So can you think of a specific experience, any of you, where that happens? I have one experience. Yeah, Ellen. Right, you're still muted. There you go.
I don't know that. I do know that when I come home and have dinner with Don, I work hard to stop thinking about work. And I focus on him, and then I go and do my sewing, or I go and do my Torah reading practice, or I go and do something totally different, and work just is not allowed in until 3:30 in the morning when I wake up and I can't sleep anymore. But I do that, and I do that purposefully, but your conversation is making me think that, those times when I don't want to talk to another human being, or I'm just too overwhelmed and I just want silence, it would probably be to my advantage to force myself to pray until it got to be habit.
Have you noticed that, especially in the beginning of the COVID-19 stay at home, one of the things that seemed to pop up regularly for people that we read about, we heard about, we saw, were these evening cocktail hours?
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of it, of course, is to connect with friends and family, but that's significant. In other words, that cocktail hour was something that was taken away from us. And I'm not speaking necessarily about the drink, the alcohol. It's that what it represents. To be able to sit with close friends and family, whether it's over a bottle of wine or a drink, or even over conversation, or even if it's just a spouse or a child, right? That is an essential part of what human beings need, right, in order to feel like new people. And right, that's what I think that first question is asking. Where are the experiences that allow us to feel like a new person in the evening, that give us that chance to separate who we were during the day from who we potentially can be? Part of, our day is filled with having to be so many people that other people expect us to be, that we lose the sense of who we really are. we lose our authentic self. We have to put on so many hats and play so many roles. And in the evening, we take off. Like, Carolyn, my wife, right? She comes home, the first thing she does is get out of her work clothes. And she always yells at me. I mean, not yells, but she always says, because I come home and my tie is still like way up to the, buttoned up. And she says, before you have dinner, why don't you go and change? Why don't you go put on something? No, take off the garb of the role that you play all the time. Come home. I never even thought about this until this moment when I'm saying it. She's saying to me, come home and be Richard. Don't come home and be Rabbi. You're Rabbi all day long. I need you to be Richard right now. So my vow, I'm going to come home from now on. I'm going to take off my work clothes and put on sweats or something else for that sake. Right? That's what I think is the question is asking us. Brenda, I saw your hand up before.
Yeah, so I was going to point out exactly what you just did. When I come home from work, I leave the job behind, but I come home to be mom. And in the mornings, like many people, it's hustle the kids off to school. Sometimes I don't even get up if my husband takes them. But in the evening, that's my opportunity to really talk with my kids about their day. And it says in the V'ahavta, V'shinantam levanecha, and you should teach your children. That's when my opportunity to do that is as we reflect on their day or my day. And what does Judaism teach us about those experiences that we had? And maybe how could we do them better next time? It's not exactly prayer, but it sort of kind of is.
Yeah, look, prayer can be defined in many different ways. There's a wide variety of understandings of prayer. But this notion of other roles to be able to play. And when you do go out, right, in the evening with friends, with your spouse, with people you care about, like one of the things that Carolyn will say to me often is if we're going out to dinner with another couple and I come home from work, she'll say to me, aren't you going to change? In other words, I don't want you to be the person who goes out to dinner with me now, the person who's coming from in your head and in your space, right? The person that you were for the last 12 hours. And I generally just, oh, I'm comfortable. I don't feel like changing, but not anymore, right? Now I'm going to change. I'm going to go to that mikvah. I'm going to be like the priests. And I am going to say, what would you like me to wear, right? How can I look differently so that you know that I'm in a different place, in a different space in this moment in the evening, as opposed to where I was all day long.
Is it because you want to do it or because Carolyn wants you to do it?
Well, isn't it enough that's because she wants to do it, even though I fight against that, right? Okay. Even though we all fight against it, whatever our spouse tells us, we know we're going to say, no. Even though we know that they're right. They know us better than we know ourselves.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a look. I think we got this text down. Yes? Any other comments about what this text is teaching us about how we are in the daytime and how we need to be in the evening? Okay, good. So, Ziggy, would you read from the Chatam Sofer, Sefer Vayikra, Perek Kaf Bet? So this is the second part of the first text that I shared with you has to do with the role of the priests in Parshat Emor. This next text has to do with the holidays, the cycle of the holidays that is in Parshat Emor.
Sefer Vayikra, Perek Kaf Bet. Ushmartem mitzvotai v'asitem otam ani Adonai.
Keep going.
V'lo techalelu et shem kodshi v'nikdashti betoch bnei Yisrael ani Adonai mekadshechem.
Okay, we read in the English, the translation.
You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I am Hashem. You shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelites people. I, Hashem, who sanctify you.
Okay, again, a pretty straightforward text, right? A verse that doesn't, say like the last few texts that we looked at in the previous week's Darshani, comment on me. Right, very simple. How do we become a sanctified people according to this verse? right? We observe the mitzvot. Why do we want to become a sanctified people? Because that's the way we bring God's holiness and God's name into the world, through the observance of mitzvot. So now let's take a look at the commentary. Bob, Carol, you good reading for us? I know I usually call on your wife, but I think you're a pretty good reader as well. You just have to unmute.
I'm unmuting him.
Okay.
The verb shall faithfully observe has a quality of meaning similar to the phrase, his father watched to see what would unfold. That is, you should wait and watch, looking forward to the moment when you will be able to fulfill mitzvot. Consider.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Consider Rabbi Akiva. All my life, I was concerned by the verse with all your heart, which means even if God takes your life. I wondered, when would I be able to fulfill this mitzvah?
Okay, so let's stop here. So, you shall faithfully observe my commandments is the comment that the Chatam Sofer is commenting on. And what he says is the verb ushmartem doesn't simply mean do it. Because if it did, there's another Hebrew word that means do it. What's that Hebrew word that says to do it?
La'asot.
Exactly, la'asot. So the fact that the Torah is not using the word la'asot tells us that lishmor doesn't mean la'asot. When I ask somebody to do something, I hope that they'll do it if it's a reasonable request. And like, I'm not looking for, especially when it comes to, saying to my son, Noah, can you wash the dishes after you've finished eating and not leave them in the sink for me or mom to take care of since you're an adult? I'm not looking for long explanations. I'm not looking for deep meditation. I'm not looking for, I'm looking la'asot, to do it. Simple as that. But ushmartem has a different feel, the verb, has a different experience, right? Because as we learned in Breshit, in Genesis, va'aviv shamar et ha'adavar, his father watched to see what would unfold. What's going on there? How do we understand this in this context, what the verb is all about?
To watch out and wait for it. Anticipate.
Okay, and isn't it interesting that when it comes to mitzvot, what are the two words that are associated with doing mitzvot?
Shamor v'zachor.
Shamor v'zachor. So in another time, we're going to talk about zachor. Here, we're talking about shamor. When you approach a mitzvah, how do you approach it? Right? When you're ready to light Shabbos candles, when you're about to say a bracha before you eat something, what happens? What is on your mind in the moment just preceding the act of the mitzvah?
Am I prepared? Do I have everything I need to do?
Okay, that I think is where we want to be. Typically, where are we when we perform a mitzvah? I think oftentimes we're just there to do it. Oh, it's candle lighting time. Let's light candles. Oh, it's time for Kiddush. Let's make Kiddush. Oh, I have to remember to say a bracha before I eat. I say a bracha before I eat. What's missing in those moments? Yeah, Barry.
I was going to say thoughtfulness.
Yeah, thoughtfulness, preparation, intention, meditation, mindful practice. That's the nature of shamor. The nature of shamor is that it's not a quick moment. It's not, I've got a list of things that I need to get done and I'm checking them off the list. That is asiyah. That's la'asot. Lishmor is, before I start checking things off the list, what's it all about? Why am I doing it? How am I going to approach it? Where am I going to find the kavanah and the meaning before I do it? Right? It adds a whole new layer of what it means to fulfill mitzvot, to be a Jew. So I would challenge us, encourage us, to think about both the first text that we looked at, the idea of how evening can manifold in our lives in a way that we take advantage of the newness of evening. And in the second, text, invite us before we engage in a mitzvah over the next, days to give thought and understand what it's all about and why are we doing this and what do we hope it's going to accomplish and how is it an expression of holiness and how does it connect me to other Jews and to God and how does it bring God's name into the world in a more meaningful, intentional way. Right, adding a level of experience and intention to the observance of mitzvot. Bob, will you continue the next paragraph?
The next verse says, "You shall not profane, that I may be sanctified." If you would only be careful not to become profane, I would view you as if you had sanctified my name. One who sits and does not trespass receives a reward as if they had positively fulfilled a mitzvah. This refers to one who waits for the opportunity to fulfill a mitzvah, yet who had not had the opportunity to fulfill it.
Okay, so he's saying a couple of very interesting things here in this verse, right? The verse, if you go back, says, first, ushmartem mitzvotai ve'asitem, right? First, pay attention, ushmartem. First, notice. First, understand what it is you're doing, then do it. I don't need two verbs here unless they're different. That's the first comment. The second comment is in the act of ushmartem and asitem, in that space, lo techalalu et shem kodshi, do not profane. In the moment when I am mindful of the act until the moment I commit the act, do not profane. Mm-hmm. There's a very practical application of this actually in our regular practice of mitzvot. Anybody know what it is? When we eat bread, what do?
We wash our hands first.
Yes, and what do we do between the washing of the hands and the eating of the bread or making motzi?
We don't speak.
Say a prayer.
Yeah, we don't speak. And why don't we speak?
Nothing should interrupt between the blessing and the act.
Or, according to this text, nothing should interrupt between the mindful act that we are engaged in washing our hands and preparing for the holy act of eating to that holy act of eating. Mm-hmm. Can we extend our mindfulness a little bit further, right, to that moment? When you light candles on Shabbat, we do this kind of thing and we close our eyes. Now, there's a practical reason why we close our eyes, because normally you say the bracha and then you do the mitzvah. The bracha precedes the mitzvah. Candle lighting, we can't do that. We can't say the bracha and then light the candles, because then we've already sanctified Shabbat. So we have to light the candles, and then we close our eyes, say the bracha as if they're not lit, and then open them so that we see the mitzvah. But from this reading, there's an added explanation for why we close our eyes before we say the bracha. And that's so that we don't become distracted. That the act of lighting the match, putting it to the candle, saying the bracha, bringing in this idea of a new moment in our lives of Shabbat, right? We have to be mindful from the beginning through the middle until the end. It extends the moment of the act. So we do not profane it anywhere in between. Think about unrelated to mitzvot, where perhaps you may inadvertently profane, right? As I said, inadvertently, unintentionally, by not being mindful the whole way through. Yeah, Sandy.
In shul, we do a lot of things I feel like by habit, by rote. You know, we stand up and for a certain prayer, we sit down first, you know, then we sit down for something else. We stand up to do the Amidah, and the exception being that we take our steps back and forward and kind of position ourselves. So we do a little bit of prep, but much we just do. And when there's times when you or someone else prior to anything in our usual Shabbat morning takes a moment and talks about what's coming up, this prayer means, or this is because, or we do this because, our intentionality, I won't speak for others, but my intentionality, I think, changes because I'm saying, oh yeah, even though I've learned about some of these before, even the ones I've learned, I've forgotten, and that reminder or that teaching puts us in that intentionality. And I think that the reciting or the listening to any given davening is more meaningful.
Great. Excellent. Yeah, Brenda.
I think that a lot of times we're in the Naaseh v'nishma mode, right? So we're told in the Torah what Jude said we will do, and then we will learn how to do it, learn what it's all about. And sometimes that's how our religious schools work, where we teach the kids the rote meaning, the rote recitation of the prayer, but not the meaning. So how are they, and they become us, how are we going to be able to be more mindful and do a little bit more of ushmartem va'asitem when we don't necessarily have that capacity or background or insight?
Yeah, and the fact is we don't need to know anything to do ushmartem va'asitem. We need to know the asitem part, but the ushmartem part really is just a matter of paying attention. Right? It's the stuff that Linda Feeder is teaching every Friday morning if you're going to the meditation class, right? It's to stay in the moment and not get distracted, right? I am the classic ADD distracted person, from, the book, If You Give a Mouse a Muffin, if you give a moose a muffin, right? Or if you give a mouse a cookie, that's me. And so the ushmartem and the va'asitem command with the lo techalalu in the middle is such a beautiful way of being able to construct how I approach, how I could approach, how I might approach each new thing that I am engaged in. Even if it's a matter of having a conversation with somebody, it's very easy when we're in conversation with somebody to be distracted while the person is talking to us. Does your mind ever wander when somebody's talking to you? Do you ever start thinking about all the other things that you might be doing or other people that you might be speaking to or whatever it is? So again, ushmartem va'asitem with the velo techalalu at Shem Kodshi is right now, this is in the moment where I am. And I don't want to profane God's name by not completely fulfilling the mitzvah, by being focused and staying in the moment with whomever it is that's standing in front of me. I think the applications of this are manifold in the way in which we construct our lives. Yeah, I think that's the questions that, are being asked to consider. So Any other thoughts to this notion of this idea? Otherwise, we have time and we'll go to the third. Oh no, we don't have time. It's 12:58. Well, it's good because I always like to leave you wanting more, and hopefully you want more. Hopefully you'll come back and study yet in another day with more learning. So last comments or thoughts before we conclude. 2 ways in which we can move in this world this week. One is to notice what happens to us in the evening and pay attention to that new time that we have. And the second is to be more mindful as we approach mitzvot and moments of interaction with other people so that we will not profane those moments and God.
That's all.
All right. Well, thank you
Great.
all.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you, Brenda, for coming and joining us from wherever it is that you live. It's nice to be able to learn with people from Jewish communities all over the country. Just tell us for a second, where is your home community?
I live in Florida and I belong to B'nai Aviv in Weston, Rabbi Adam Rothstein Shul.
Very nice. Well, we are glad to have you and come back for any and all of our wonderful classes.
Thank you.
And to all of you, I will see you soon. Remember, Hannah's teaching tonight. Tomorrow evening, we have our Shabbat services at 6 with candle lighting at 6:45. We have a Havdalah program where you're going to get on Zoom for Havdalah. We're doing cocktails and a little bit of a fun game together. And then on Shabbat morning, we are also going to be Zooming in at the end of the services and having a virtual Kiddush. So stay tuned for something new this coming Shabbat. And and sign up for our wine tasting with Cantor Keith Miller, Unwind. Visit to 3 different wineries and the tasting of 2 wines, unless of course you're very generous to the community and you make the donation for the 3rd bottle of wine and the gift. So sign up and join us for that in a week and a half Sunday.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
All
Good
right.
to see everyone.
Take
Thank
care,
you. Nice to see
everybody.
everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.